January 26, 1945. Holtzvier, Alsace, 3:15 in the afternoon. The snow had stopped falling an hour ago, leaving the fields outside the French village wrapped in that peculiar silence that comes when winter has consumed all sound. Lieutenant Audie Murphy stood in the frozen mud, watching his breath crystallize in the air, and tried to remember what warmth felt like. His hands, those small, almost delicate hands that had picked cotton in Texas dust bowls and now killed men with professional efficiency, gripped his carbine with fingers gone white at the knuckles. 21 years old, 127 pounds soaking wet. He commanded 40 men who looked like ghosts of themselves, their eyes holding that 1,000-yard stare that comes from seeing too much death and knowing more awaited. The ground trembled first, not the sharp crack of artillery, but something deeper, a rhythmic pounding that traveled through the frozen earth and into his boots, his legs, his chest. Murphy knew that tremor. He had felt it before, at Anzio, at the Rapido River, in the Vosges Mountains. Tank treads, multiple tanks, German armor that could turn flesh and bone into memory and smoke. Then he saw them. 6 Jag Panthers emerged from the tree line, like prehistoric beasts materializing from fog. Behind them, moving in that methodical, terrifying German infantry formation he had come to recognize instantly, came the soldiers. Not 30 or 40, not even 100. Murphy's practiced eye counted sections, squads, the spacing between them. Approximately 250 men, a full German infantry company, supported by tank destroyers that could punch holes through American Shermans at 1,000 yards. His 40 soldiers, their 6 Jag Panthers. The mathematics of death had rarely been so clearly defined. "Christ," someone whispered behind him. Murphy didn't turn to see who. It didn't matter. They were all thinking the same thing. Audie Leon Murphy had learned about impossible odds long before the Army taught him. Born on a Texas sharecropper's farm in 1924, he had watched his father abandon the family when he was 12, had watched his mother die of overwork when he was 16, had worked fields under a sun that seemed personally vindictive, had gone to bed hungry more nights than not. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, he was 17 and weighed 110 pounds. Too small, the recruiters said, for military service. The Marines rejected him. The paratroopers rejected him. The Army nearly rejected him. He lied about his age, ate bananas and drank water until he barely met the weight requirement, and entered the service in June 1942, with the kind of determination that comes from having nothing left to lose. They sent him to the 3rd Infantry Division. They sent him to North Africa. They sent him to places where young men discovered that courage and fear are not opposites, but conjoined twins, inseparable and equally real. By January 1945, Murphy had already killed so many men he had stopped counting. Not from callousness, but from necessity, the same way a butcher stops counting cuts after the 1,000th hog. He had earned the Silver Star in Sicily, the Distinguished Service Cross at the Rapido River, Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, battlefield commissions. The decorations accumulated like rust on steel, marking each place where death had reached for him and missed by inches. But this was different. This was mathematics that even his proven skill couldn't recalculate. 40 men against 250, no defensive positions, no prepared fallback point, an open field that provided as much cover as a prayer. The M10 tank destroyer sat 200 yards to their right, a temporary advantage, a steel monument to American industrial might. 34,000 pounds of armored steel with a 3-inch gun that could, in theory, engage those Jag Panthers. In theory. In practice, the M10's armor was barely thicker than a good winter coat. The German 88mm guns on those Jag Panthers could core it like an apple. Murphy made his decision in the space between heartbeats, the decision that would define not just this day, but the way wars would be remembered, the way courage would be measured, the way one small man from Texas would become a story fathers told sons. "Fall back," he said. His voice carried that flat, unargumentable tone that came from months of men following his orders and living because of them. "Move to the tree line. I'll cover you." His platoon sergeant, a 28-year-old from Michigan named Pete, stared at him. "Lou, that's..." "Now, Sergeant." The German artillery opened up. Not the preparatory barrage of a tentative probe, but the full-throated roar of an assault meant to shatter defenders before the infantry ever engaged. Shells landed in sequence, walking across the frozen field with the methodical precision of a farmer planting seeds. Each explosion threw up geysers of black earth, white snow, and the gray smoke that seemed to be the signature color of this entire war. Murphy watched his men retreat, watched them stumble through snow and mud, watched them hunker under the shelling, watched them move toward relative safety while he stood still. The M10's crew was bailing out, 3 men scrambling from the tank destroyer as an artillery round landed 30 yards away, the concussion wave hitting them like an invisible fist. Then Murphy saw the smoke, black, oily smoke curling from the M10's engine compartment. A near miss had ruptured something: fuel line, oil reservoir, some crucial artery of the machine. Fire followed smoke the way night follows day. Small flames at first, almost gentle, licking at the steel like curious tongues. Any sane man would have run. Murphy ran toward the flames. The M10's machine gun was an M2 Browning 50 caliber, belt-fed, air-cooled, capable of firing between 450 and 550 rounds per minute at an effective range of 1,800 yards. It sat in a turret designed for a 3-man crew. Murphy climbed onto the burning tank destroyer alone, the heat from the spreading fire warming his frozen hands, even as smoke began to fill his lungs. The jagged Panthers were still advancing. The German infantry behind them moved with that terrible mechanical efficiency that characterized Wehrmacht tactics. Not running, not charging with wild abandon like Hollywood would later depict, but advancing with the steady pressure of men who expected to win because they usually did. They had taken Poland in weeks, France in months, had rolled across Russia until winter, and distance finally stopped them. 40 American soldiers retreating across a field were not a military challenge. They were an administrative task. Murphy chambered the first round and opened fire. The Browning roared. 50 caliber rounds are not bullets in the conventional sense. They are small artillery shells, each one half an inch in diameter, weighing about 2 ounces, traveling at 2,900 feet per second. They don't just wound, they destroy. They tear limbs from bodies. They punch through trees, through walls, through the conviction that advancing across open ground is ever safe. The German infantry line wavered. Not broke, Wehrmacht soldiers were too disciplined for that, but hesitated. Men began to go down. Not gracefully like in movies, but with the ugly abruptness of puppets with cut strings. Murphy fired in controlled bursts, the way they had taught him at Fort Meade a lifetime ago, traversing the line, forcing the Germans to scatter, to seek cover, to stop being an organized assault and start being individuals trying desperately not to die. The Jagdpanther's machine guns returned fire. Tracers cut through the winter air like angry fireflies. Murphy felt the impacts against the M10's armor. Sharp metallic pings like rain on a tin roof. Except each drop was trying to kill him. The turret shield protected him, barely. He could feel the heat from the fire growing stronger behind him, could smell his own uniform beginning to singe. Smoke from the burning tank destroyer began to obscure his view. He kept firing. His hands found the rhythm. Traverse left, fire, traverse right, fire, reload, traverse center, fire. The Germans were adapting now, spreading wider, trying to flank. Murphy shifted his aim, caught a squad moving through a depression 200 yards out, fired a long burst that kicked up frozen earth and sent men sprawling. The pain came at 3:37. Later, the official reports would note simply, Lieutenant Murphy sustained shrapnel wounds to his right leg. Those 5 words would do nothing to describe the reality, the white-hot sensation of metal fragments entering flesh, the immediate shock that made his entire leg go numb, the blood that began to soak through his wool trousers and freeze in the winter air. Murphy looked down, saw the damage, and knew with medical certainty that he should be going into shock. He kept firing. Time became elastic. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours compressed into seconds. The world narrowed to the machine gun sights, the approaching Germans, the telephone line he had somehow maintained to his company's artillery observer. Between bursts of machine gun fire, Murphy called in coordinates. Adjusted fire. brought American artillery down on German positions with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel made of high explosive. Fire for effect, grid coordinates, Baker 7934. The shells came screaming in. 105mm howitzers firing from positions 2 miles back, their rounds arcing through the gray sky and landing among the German infantry with the kind of devastating accuracy that only comes from someone who can see the target, who knows exactly where to place the steel rain. The Germans began to waver more seriously now. This wasn't a retreating American force. This was a dug-in position with artillery support, and the mathematics of the assault suddenly looked much less favorable. Murphy's leg was going cold. Not just numb, but cold. The kind of cold that means blood loss, shock, the early stages of the body shutting down non-essential systems to preserve the core. He could feel himself getting lightheaded. The edges of his vision began to sparkle with those little lights that mean the brain isn't getting enough oxygen. He kept firing. The M10 was fully engulfed now. Flames rose 10 feet from the engine compartment, black smoke pouring into the winter sky like a funeral pyre. The heat was intense enough that Murphy's back was burning, his uniform actually beginning to char. He could hear ammunition cooking off inside the tank destroyer, small caliber rounds at first, popping like firecrackers, then something larger that made the entire vehicle shudder. Any moment now, the main gun ammunition would go. 3-inch shells, high explosive, enough to turn the M10 into a bomb and Murphy into scattered pieces across 50 yards of French farmland. He kept firing. The German assault stalled, not retreated. Wehrmacht doctrine didn't allow for easy retreats, but stopped advancing. The Jag Panthers sat at 500 yards, their crews reluctant to close with a position that was bringing down accurate artillery fire. The infantry had gone to ground, unwilling to cross that final 200 yards of open ground into a storm of 50 caliber machine gun fire. Murphy had held them. One man, one burning tank destroyer, one machine gun. Approximately 60 minutes of sustained combat that would later be analyzed by military tacticians around the world, trying to understand how it was possible, trying to extract lessons that could be taught to other soldiers. At 4:43, the machine gun went silent, not because Murphy had stopped firing, but because the ammunition had finally run out. He had fired every belt available, approximately 3,000 rounds, had carved his name in fire and death across a French field. The German commanders, watching from the tree line, made a decision. This position was too costly. This attack was stalled. Pull back, regroup, try somewhere else. Murphy watched them retreat. Then, and only then, did he climb down from the burning M10. His leg collapsed under him immediately. He fell into the snow, rolled, tried to stand, couldn't. His hands were burned. His face was burned. His right leg wouldn't support weight. Blood had soaked through his trousers and boots, leaving a dark trail in the snow. He began to crawl toward his company's position. The first American soldier to reach him was a corporal named Jackson, who later said Lieutenant Murphy's face was black as coal from the smoke, and he was grinning like he'd just won at poker. They carried him to an aid station, a farmhouse basement that smelled of blood and antiseptic and fear. This was where the second shock came. Murphy had expected to die. He had made peace with that probability somewhere around the 40-minute mark of his stand. When he didn't die on the burning tank destroyer, he expected to die from his wounds, the way so many soldiers died, bleeding out in aid stations while medics triaged more salvageable cases, waiting for morphine that might never come. Instead, he was immediately treated. No waiting line. No assessment of whether he was worth the resources. A doctor, a captain with hands that moved with the speed and confidence of someone who had sewn up hundreds of soldiers, was examining his leg within 5 minutes of arrival. "You're going to be fine, Lieutenant," the doctor said, already preparing to remove the shrapnel. "Clean wounds. Missed the major vessels. You're lucky." Lucky? Murphy almost laughed. He had spent over an hour on a burning tank destroyer, had held off approximately 250 German soldiers and 6 Jag Panthers, had been wounded and kept fighting, and now he was being told he was lucky. But he was lucky. Lucky in ways he couldn't have imagined. The American medical system in World War II was a miracle of organization and resources. While German soldiers often died from treatable wounds due to supply shortages, While Russian soldiers sometimes waited days for medical attention, American GIs received immediate, professional care. The morphine was real, not sawdust adulterated synthetic. The sulfa powder was abundant. The blood for transfusions was available. They operated on Murphy immediately, removed the shrapnel, cleaned the wounds, stitched him up, gave him real anesthesia, real painkillers, real antibiotics. Within an hour, he was resting in a clean bed with actual sheets, the kind of care that would have seemed impossible in any other army, in any other war. "I can't believe," Murphy said groggily, the morphine making his thoughts slow and liquid. "I can't believe you just saved me. Just like that." The doctor looked at him with an expression Murphy would remember for the rest of his life. Not pity, not admiration, just a kind of matter-of-fact professionalism. "Son," the doctor said, "that's what we do. That's the whole point." The Medal of Honor came 6 months later. The recommendation written by Murphy's company commander read, "Second Lieutenant Audie L. Murphy's indomitable courage in his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction, and enabled it to hold the woods which had been the enemy's objective." The citation detailed the action. Approximately 250 German soldiers, 6 Jag Panthers, 1 burning M10 tank destroyer, 1 man, 1 hour, 1 impossible stand that redefined what courage meant. They held the ceremony at a base in France. A general pinned the medal, a light blue ribbon with 13 white stars surrounding a gold medallion depicting Minerva holding a sword and shield, onto Murphy's uniform while photographers captured the moment. Murphy stood at attention, his wounded legs still stiff, his face carefully composed into the expressionless mask soldiers learn to wear when receiving commendations. He felt nothing, not pride, not satisfaction, not relief, just a hollow emptiness that all the medals in the world couldn't fill. Because Murphy understood something the generals and photographers didn't, something that haunted him in the years to come. He had held that line not through courage, but through something much simpler and more terrible. He had held that line because running meant watching his men die, and he had already watched too many men die. He had held that line because the alternative was unthinkable, not because the action itself was heroic. Courage, he would later understand, isn't the absence of fear. It isn't even acting despite fear. Courage is the moment when you realize that the thing you're afraid of is less terrible than the thing you'll become if you run. After the war, they told Murphy's story everywhere. Newspapers, radio programs. Hollywood came calling naturally. They made a movie about his life in 1955, To Hell and Back, with Murphy playing himself because the studio insisted no actor could credibly portray someone so small doing such impossible things. The irony wasn't lost on him. He struggled with what they now call PTSD, but what he just called the war in my head, insomnia, nightmares, an inability to form lasting connections with people who hadn't been there, who couldn't understand what it meant to kill 200 men in an afternoon and then receive immediate medical care that saved your life, while German soldiers your age died in snowdrifts because their supply lines had collapsed. The guilt was worse than the combat. Murphy had survived when better men with families, with college educations, with bright futures, had died. He had received the Medal of Honor when sergeants who had saved his life multiple times received nothing but a grave marker. He had become famous while the dead remained forever 20, forever anonymous, forever buried in foreign soil. In interviews later in life, Murphy was asked repeatedly, "Were you afraid?" "Terrified," he always answered. "The whole time." "Then how did you do it?" He never had a good answer for that. How do you explain that sometimes courage is just exhaustion wearing a different face? That sometimes heroism is nothing more than stubbornness, a refusal to let the mathematics win? That sometimes you don't survive because you're brave, but because luck and logistics and a medical system that valued every soldier's life gave you a chance that history denied to millions of others? The truth about Audie Murphy's stand at Holtzvier isn't found in the Medal of Honor citation. It's found in the small details that official reports never capture. The way his hands shook for 3 days after the battle, a tremor so severe he couldn't hold a cup of coffee without spilling it. The way he woke up screaming for 6 months straight, dreaming of burning alive inside that M10. The way he kept a photograph of his squad in his wallet until the day he died, touching it sometimes like a talisman, remembering faces that never got to grow old. The way he advocated quietly and persistently for better treatment of veterans with psychological wounds, long before it was fashionable or politically advantageous to do so. The way he never claimed to be a hero. Never. Not once. When people called him brave, he would smile that tight smile of his and say, "I just didn't want to die that day. That's all." On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy died in a plane crash near Roanoke, Virginia. He was 46 years old. They buried him at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. The pallbearers included an actor, a congressman, and several generals. Thousands attended the funeral. President Nixon sent a wreath. But the most telling detail was this. They had to keep the cemetery open for 3 extra hours because the line of people wanting to pay respects stretched for miles. Not just veterans, though there were many of those. Not just fans of his movies, though there were plenty, but ordinary people, farmers, mechanics, teachers, housewives, who knew his story and understood somehow that it represented something essential about what Americans like to believe about themselves. That courage isn't about size or strength or advantages. That one person in the right place, refusing to yield, can change the mathematics of impossible situations. That luck and logistics and a nation's resources matter as much as individual heroism. That survival is a gift, not a reward. That fame is hollow. That medals are cold comfort. That the real story of courage is always more complicated, more painful, and more human than the legend. Today, if you visit Holtzvier, there's a monument near where Murphy made his stand. A simple stone marker with a bronze plaque explaining what happened there on January 26, 1945. The field is peaceful now, covered in crops in summer, snow in winter, showing no signs of the violence that consumed it for one afternoon 79 years ago. Sometimes tourists visit, American veterans mostly, making pilgrimages to understand what their fathers or grandfathers endured. They stand in the field, look at the distances involved, and inevitably say the same thing. How was it possible? The answer is, it wasn't. Not by any reasonable calculation, not by any logical assessment. 127 pounds against 250 soldiers and 6 tank destroyers. Wounded, burning, alone. It wasn't possible, except it happened. That's the thing about history that makes it more compelling than fiction. Fiction has to be believable. History just has to be true. And the truth is that sometimes impossible things occur because one person decides that running is more unbearable than staying, that letting others die is more unthinkable than dying yourself, that the mathematics of war can be defied by the stubborn refusal of one small man from Texas who learned early that life doesn't care about odds, only about what you do when the odds are impossible. Audie Murphy stood. That's the entirety of it. That's the whole story, stripped of decoration and legend and Hollywood sentiment. When every calculation said run, when every instinct screamed retreat, when mathematics and common sense and survival instinct all pointed in the same direction, Murphy stood. And in standing, he showed that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about doing the impossible thing anyway, because the alternative is unthinkable. It's about holding the line when there's no line to hold. It's about fighting when the fight is already lost, on the slim chance that determination can bend reality just enough to make victory possible. One man, 250 Germans, 1 hour, one impossible stand that became the measure by which all other acts of courage would be judged. That's what happened at Holtzvier on January 26, 1945. That's what we remember when we remember Audie Murphy. Not the medals, not the movies. Not the legend, just the simple, impossible fact. He stood, and standing was enough.